Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining this morning. I'm Mary Miller, and I want to begin by thanking the Maryland Technology Council for putting this on. I saved a Baltimore Business Journal article from last year where the Maryland Technology Council was endorsing the concept of achieving digital equity and even creating an advocacy group to achieve that goal in Maryland. So I really applaud you for hosting this session, and I hope that we'll find some ways to work together from this conversation this morning. So I'm joining today in my capacity as a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins 21st Century Cities Initiative. We published a paper in January called Achieving Digital Equity in Baltimore, which includes a roadmap of recommendations of how we think that could be accomplished. And I fully appreciate this morning that our conversation is broader than the city of Baltimore, but we want to talk about this not just at the city level and at the state level. So I'd like to introduce each of our panelists this morning, and we are very, very fortunate to have some real experts here. I should say at the outset that my son describes me as a tech-nidiot. I'm an odd choice to write a paper about digital anything, but I saw this as a critical issue in moving our society forward. And I think we can all recognize that the last year of enduring this terrible public health crisis and pandemic has only highlighted what was already a digital divide issue. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves and to answer the first question, which is, what does digital equity look like? And what does digital equity mean to you? In our paper, we describe digital equity as a state of fair access and effective use of the technology necessary to participate in modern society. And a lot of work has been done to show the shortfalls of that state and to try to measure where we are and where we need to get to. I think there's been so much description and interest, it's really time to start talking more about the solutions and how we get there. So let me stop there, and let's start with Chrissie Powell. If you could introduce yourself and answer that question, what does digital equity mean?
Sure, thank you, Mary. So I'm Chrissie Powell. I'm the executive director of Byte Baltimore. I am also one of the co-founders of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition. So digital equity is, to me, it is truly the holistic approach to digital access. So we are not just talking connectivity. We are talking device access. We are talking digital skills, digital literacy skills, and we're talking tech supports. So digital equity is including everybody, that nobody is left out of being able to access technology. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. So digital equity is often kind of put in its own category, but it's truly falls under the umbrella of racial equity. And it's important that we state that, recognize and acknowledge that digital equity is heavily associated with racial equity, and just ensuring that all people, inclusive of Black and Brown people and low-income individuals, have access to connectivity, to devices, to digital literacy skills, training, as well as tech supports. So I won't ramble on yet. I'll stop there and pass it on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissie. Let's go to Misty Allen.
Good morning. Thank you, Mary, Chrissie, John. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And thank you to the Maryland Tech Council for hosting this event today. I'm Misty Allen, Regional Vice President of Government Affairs and Community Impact for Comcast in their Beltway region. Beltway region encompasses from West Virginia, the District of Columbia, the great state of Maryland, and Delaware. What does digital equity mean to me? We're talking about it. It's about providing that digital access to the technology and opportunity for all. So it's the intersection for us at Comcast, our people, our culture, our technology, and our communities, and investing in our communities. And we're doing that through our innovative products and services. Think of our simply our voice remote or eye control for people with disabilities, providing that access to technology so they can perform in their digital life. Our Internet Essentials program, it's a $9.95 broadband connectivity product that's attempting to address one of the barriers of affordability for people. So again, it's really working to ensure that we're providing that access and the opportunity for all.
Thank you. John, you're up.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you again to the Maryland Tech Council for putting this important conversation together. I'm John Foster. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a company located in Baltimore called Fearless. Our primary purpose is to develop software with a soul, right? We want to build, we work with a federal government, state, city government to build software solutions. We do a lot of things in the digital transformation space. So this idea of digital equity for us is one that we see day in and day out in all those areas and at various levels. For me, digital equity boils down to and I want to piggyback on what Chrissie said, right? And I'll tell a story, right? So my wife is a principal in one of the counties here in the state, and one day after work, she came upstairs and she just cried. And she told the story about how she was on the phone with a mother, and she didn't tell me the names, right, of the person, but she said she was on the phone with a mother who was just struggling to like help her kid, right, get through the day because of, lack of access, their connectivity dropping out, attention for the kid and the things that kid needed, right? And so, and she went on to say that like that's just one of many stories, right? Heartbreaking stories that she has to deal with day in and day out, right? So for me, equity is digital equity is filtered through the lens of access, as Christie said, but more so broadly speaking, it is this idea that we need to get everybody what they need individually. Like let's not ignore the equity piece, right? Everybody needs something different, and it requires different approaches to close those gaps, right? So that's what digital equity means to me.
Well, that sort of dovetails directly into my next question. Because you've answered this in a way, John, I'm just going to ask Chrissie and Misty if you could talk a little bit about how the COVID-19 pandemic has really magnified this issue. I want to be clear, this is not a new issue. In 2019, a study suggested that here in Baltimore, 40% of our households did not have digital access. But this issue of equity has really come to the fore, I think, in the pandemic. So if each of you could maybe just show what you've seen. I've certainly seen huge examples in access to telemedicine, for example. You just mentioned an education example, John, but Chrissie and Misty, how has the last year made this even more obvious and maybe more critical?
Yes, you bring up a great point, Mary. When it's hard, almost impossible to find a silver lining, with COVID, and the pandemic. But I do have to say that it did shed a huge spotlight on the digital divide, around digital access and equity. So, for us at Byte Back, similarly, you mentioned the 40%, that's speaking to our adult learners that either did not or do not have a device in their home, or aren't connected to the internet at all. So when we all went virtual, Byte Back was affected by that. We had to switch over our classes to virtual learning, just like many other workforce development organizations and adult learning centers as well. Everything went virtual. So we had to figure out how in the world do we support our community members who are participating in our programs, support them so that they can continue their education, so that they can get into a living wage career, or so that they can get their GED and adult literacy training. So for us, we had to really find different ways to support, which is, loaner laptops, for instance, getting laptops into the hands of our, for Byteback's perspective, adult learners. I know this is also K through 12 as well, but getting devices into their homes so that they can continue learning, as well as having training on Zoom, because many of different organizations, including Byteback, instruction is now from in person to Zoom. So we had to individually support our adults and how to get comfortable, how to use and how to navigate Zoom. So that said, besides the devices and getting them connected to, Comcast Internet Essentials being I would say, Comcast being the major company and representation in Baltimore, and the Internet Essentials, which is an affordable program, getting them connected to Comcast Internet Essentials is really one of the first go-tos as well. So that said, one thing that was missing was tech supports. I knew for our students, we needed to have a way for them, if they were getting online and having issues getting on, that they could call somebody and speak with somebody to help troubleshoot, to help them navigate getting to their class, their e-learning class. So when I talked to the colleagues, at the Adult Learning Center, South Baltimore Learning Center, for instance, other workforce development organizations, they're like, we're having the same issue. Our students, our program participants cannot navigate the computer, so they can't get on e-learning. So that is where the solution came up. That kind of light bulb is, our students at Byteback need tech supports. Every student, every person, especially learners in the city, need tech support. So that's where, with the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition, we went ahead and spearheaded the formation of the tech support hotline for adult learners in workforce development and adult education programs, where they can pick up the phone, speak to somebody live, a help desk technician live, to help walk them through any issues they're having navigating the computer so they can successfully get on their classes. So those were just a few things that, as really a rapid response effort to COVID, the disparities that were really highlighted because of COVID, just some immediate actions that had to take place in order to keep things moving.
Thank you. Misty, what did you see from where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, Chrissie nailed it for the most part. I mean, obviously from Comcast, our response during the pandemic was, oh my gosh, we're, as a major corporation, we're pivoting and sending 3,000 people home to work from home. We had to make sure, employees are connected, but our communities are connected. So for us, what the pandemic did is, I think everyone has said, this has been a problem that has been in existence. It's something, it has highlighted it, and now people are going to put resources behind it. And I think, as we talk with our city officials, and wonderful legislation moving through the Maryland State House currently, there will be statewide strategy around this issue with a real focus. And, I think while we have all been working in our, in our little space on what we can do on this topic, I think it has now fostered more collaboration, more pooling of resources, and we're starting to see the result of what can come together when communities really start to tackle a problem through the lens of equity. And so I think Chrissie said it great. If there's, it's hard to say anything good came out of the pandemic, but if that is a bright spot, I think this is it for this issue.
Let me press a little bit harder on this issue of digital equity and structural racism. In my seat at the 21st Century Cities Initiative, we've done a lot of work looking at issues like access to capital across the city of Baltimore. and in particular looked at the history of redlining in the city, which created very physical boundaries of poverty and neighborhoods of tremendous disinvestment. And not surprisingly, when we overlay, maps of digital access and usage in the city, it is squarely landing on the same neighborhoods and parts of Baltimore that show extreme poverty and the history of decisions that were made that really locked people into, very, very difficult choices as far as education, work, and income, housing, public health. How should we think about this problem and the history of structural racism in society? Some people describe digital equity as a human right, and I think I agree with that. If we are going to be a society that is equitable in the future, we've got to solve this problem. But I'm going to start with John this time. Just, this is a huge topic, but any insight you would want to provide on this?
Yeah, a couple thoughts, right? And we can go down many paths here, right? I think it's important to understand, or where I'm going to take the conversation is around the responsibility of government to help close that gap, right? I think that we all first have to acknowledge that there are inequities and there is systemic racism that exists within our government structures, right? First and foremost, but that doesn't necessarily alleviate or mean that the government doesn't have a responsibility to first understand that they helped to build the system that we operate in, and now they have to unravel that system to help fix the inequities that exist. So for example, I'm very encouraged that Mayor Scott has opened up this office of digital equity, right? I hope that what that does is not place Jason in a seat of just being a figurehead, right? But also gives Jason and his department the budget and the authority to do the work that's required, right? One of the things that we see, at Fearless, doing a lot of work with the government is 9 times out of 10, if an agency or if a program division or whatever initiative doesn't have authority and doesn't have budget, it goes absolutely nowhere. And you can go look at some of the use cases that are in this paper that you wrote, Mary, around other cities that have recognized that thought. They've installed somebody as a figurehead, but have not, pulled that thread all the way through to give them the authority to fix that. So I hope anybody who's listening, right, go and talk to Jason, go and encourage the city government to make sure that Jason has the appropriate funds and authority to do what he needs to do to unravel that thread. So that's my high level thought there.
If I could just piggyback on what John was saying, I think it's so important that the resources are there. They have to be there. They must be there. And I think that's definitely been a struggle for the city of Baltimore. Is we have all of these amazing organizations and community members and groups coming together to make a difference, but everything requires money. Everything requires resources. So ensuring that that there's accountability for these funds that are allocated to digital equity and rebuilding. So just making sure that they get where they need to go. But beyond that, even if the resources, when the resources come in and they are spent accordingly at the city level, speaking of Baltimore or any city, I still think there's a huge gap there between the resources being available and the resources and the community being aware that these resources are available to them and knowing how to access these resources once these resources become available. So I feel like with these funds, yes, all these programs, whether it's digital literacy skills training, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's getting devices out there, the community has to buy in. we have to have community buy-in and community participation. And I don't mean just workforce organizations. I don't mean just these nonprofits. I mean church leaders. I mean community association leaders, community members, because we have to have community telling community that these resources are available. So this funding, we have to have some funding set aside for what we call advertising and marketing, but what truly is getting the word out on the street so that it can be effective, so that our community and our people are aware that these are available and can make use of them. Because if community doesn't know about it or know how to access it, we're really doing all of this for nothing. So we can say we've done, oh, I did this, I started this program, oh, we got this bill passed. That's great. Does the community know about it? Do they know how to access it? These are the things that resources also need to be spent on. And whether that's through like tech support hotline, for instance, that we have currently going, investing in that so that we can have a phone number so community can know I can call and speak to another community member and they'll be able to tell me exactly how to go about getting this, say Comcast Internet Essentials, for instance, or going to PCs for People to get this device. So I just wanted to make sure that we don't miss that huge piece. And I know digital navigators is something that NDIA, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, is pushing. Digital navigators is going to be important to fund digital navigators, community members to be in the community knocking on doors and sharing the good news, if you will, of the available resources.
Thank you, Chrissie. Misty, you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. I think John and Chrissie have touched on it, as, with respect to the role of government. We talk about it when we talk with our government partners, it is being part of their solution with this has to be an integrated function within how you operate. So if I'm going in for assistance on housing vouchers, or I'm going in for assistance on SNAP or TANF benefits, there needs to be that digital equity has to be part of that discussion with that family. And so and then the resources provided. So, to Chrissie's point that the community has to know what is available to them. I look at this like this is integrated, it's part of the benefits, just as you would do for access for food insecurity or heating assistance. Digital equity has to be part of that envelope, those families in providing them that assistance. And that just helps those families embrace their digital life and understanding the value of needing to participate in the digital economy, workforce, education, telehealth, all of that. But I think for this, I think the starting point is making sure that it's part of our overall benefits and overall discussion with our community, that digital equity is at the forefront. It continues to be at the forefront of our discussion, and not an add-on, but this is how we live. So.
Thank you. I want to talk about what steps have been taken in Baltimore City and Maryland towards achieving digital equity, and ask you to be as specific as possible. I'd like to ask, what needs to be done? What still lies ahead? I'm going to start with John and ask, how can Maryland's technology community contribute towards achieving digital equity? I've been very clear, this can't happen in the public sector alone. It has to be a partnership, the public and private sector and the nonprofit sector, and we'll get to that. But from where you sit, and I think this is particularly relevant to the Maryland Technology Council, which has voiced concern, support, and advocacy for this topic, how can we leverage the private sector here?
Yeah, once again, a couple of different thoughts here. I want to piggyback to something that Chrissie said as far as responsibility to close the gap in educating or bringing awareness to the situation. So that'll be my second point. My first point is I think it is the responsibility of businesses to help close the gap on the digital literacy side, not in the education of people, right? We have the nonprofits of the world that are helping to do that, and they're doing that fairly well. I think what we tend to do, there's some cognitive dissonance there around, is the responsibility of businesses to actually create services, right? That aren't cumbersome, right? So that the literacy gap doesn't have to be so great. We don't have to teach so much. If a student is struggling to like understand how to use a piece of software, yeah, we can help them understand the software, but take a complete step back. Is the software built in a way that helps them be effective from the get-go? And I think this is that space that we're in the larger and broader scale around digital transformation and this revolution that we're going through, and the realization that as we build software, as we build services for our communities, right? Businesses have to understand you don't build software for you. You're building software for somebody else. And if you're not taking and being empathetic to how people use your software, how they use your services, how they can gain access to your services, you are fundamentally missing out on a large demographic of folks that, you can either help, you can either grow your revenue, and all those things combined, right? So I would say first and foremost to the companies on this call, right? Take a step back. Are you even building the right thing? Do you have the right service? And I think if you just, be a little bit more empathetic and understand like what's going on from an equity standpoint, if you are concerned and you want to be an advocate about it, here's a perfect opportunity. Here's the action call for you to close that gap, right? And then I guess to my second point is, and I want to, just to applaud, Chrissie here, right? It is the responsibility of businesses to lift your heads up some and look around and just make sure that you understand your stance and how you can bring awareness to the situation around equity. I think that not enough businesses spend time just talking about this. So two thoughts.
Yeah, and John, I honestly, I have never looked at it from that lens that you presented, which is, yes, we can teach community, we can teach residents how to use software, but are the companies building software that is user friendly for the communities who are in need, for the communities that aren't thought about usually, that aren't considered typically? And I know because you're from that, that you're in a tech company, so and you're thinking that way, and Fearless is building your software with that in mind. So I think that's an amazing approach, and I feel like that approach would require community to be involved. That would require businesses to listen to community, to get out there and hold forums or town hall meetings to really hear what the needs of the community members are. So amazing. I'm so happy that you brought that up, because that really has, I guess for me, just kind of shed a new light on what businesses can do, what these big tech companies can do to really shift their software and their development, to in a lens of equity. Thank you for that. Thank you.
So I'm going to pull this back to Misty to ask a question around this concept of what steps have been taken in Baltimore. What more should we be doing? And if you don't mind, I'd love to hear your thinking about the new federal program from the FCC on emergency broadband access, and whether there's an opportunity there for us to be taking advantage of, not just in Baltimore, but in Maryland.
Sure. Yes. So what steps have been taken in Baltimore? We'll start when the pandemic first hit and everybody had to shift work from home and schools closures. Baltimore City schools immediately identified and knew the families that were not connected. So they have stepped in and are sponsoring and paying for internet service on behalf of those families that may not be able to afford it, to ensure they have that continuity of online schooling. So that was the K through 12 response in the city that did great. But we saw that nationwide. We saw schools really becoming at the forefront of this to care for those families that were in need of connectivity. Prince George's County was another one. And in fact, they had already been working on a strategic plan around digital equity, realizing that part of the issues with the homework gap and opportunity gap there was that they knew that, again, our education system is all online. We have to have access to the internet to do our homework, to do our research. So they'd already started strategically thinking about this and planning for this in the county, in Prince George's County as well. And then of course, the collaboration, the work that the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition has done to step up and help that people know how to navigate, how to get online, how to check into your class, how to sign up for the vaccine registration. All of that, again, reflects back how much our life is digital. But beyond just Baltimore City as well, I want us to make sure that we talk about what the state is doing also, because there's the adoption issue that we've been largely talking about, but there is still also the availability of infrastructure in our very rural areas as well. And the state of Maryland has set up through their Office of Rural Broadband a great public-private partnership grant program where communities can apply for funds to help offset the cost of expanding this type of infrastructure to the more rural areas of the state. And they're in their second year of funding that program. It's a great model. We know that there's several hundred homes that would not otherwise have had service during the pandemic that have it due to these programs. And so these are the types of, as Chrissie and John talked about, getting the resources and really the focused attention on this out there. But those are some steps and actions that have been taken and are continuing to be built upon.
Anything to add on the FCC program that we're reading about?
Yeah. So then there's you're right, the FCC in the December stimulus bill that passed out of Congress put $3.2 billion into an emergency broadband benefit program. And so this will give individual homeowners, households, up to $50 of credit towards their broadband service bill. It also allows for up to $100 credit for the purchase of a laptop or computing device. So this is a program that will roll out through the FCC. People may be familiar with the FCC's program Lifeline, which provided credit towards broadband or wireless services. This is an extension of that and has opened it up to more participants. Companies like Comcast can participate in this program. And so this will roll out mid to late April. And the best thing that can be done is, everyone on this call, our government partners, is get the word out, making sure that households know how to sign up. So this will be a great opportunity for the Digital Equity Coalition's hotline in Baltimore City to make sure as they're having conversations with their clients to make sure that people are aware of its availability and get people signed up.
Thank you. And the reason I pressed on that a little bit is that in our work, we identified issues about access and also use of internet and of course devices. But it seems to me that the bigger nut to crack here is finding an ongoing source of support for monthly internet service that is high quality, reliable, and effective for all the needs that we've identified. So I think this program from the FCC, which is called Emergency, I hope will become a permanent source of support so that people who adopt digital devices in use will have a way to continue to pay for it. So thank you for that information.
Mary, can I chime in there? I do want to, I think it is amazing, and I applaud Comcast for coming, getting on board, with the EBB benefits and really increasing the speeds even of internet in homes. I guess my concern is, so a family, let's just say, I'm just saying Baltimore City, a family in Baltimore City can get $50 a month towards their internet bill. So they can pay maybe virtually $0, close to $0, for a year. What happens once that year is up, is my concern. So after that year is up, are they going to, suddenly be dropped? Are they going to have a bill that they weren't expecting and then be put into more debt? And whatever is going to happen at the end of that year, I think is really important for us to do forward thinking, because I know when COVID happened and there were fees being waived as far as folks who owed, say, Comcast on their bills, who weren't able to have supports during COVID. Comcast eventually stepped up and said, you know what, yes, we're extending this so that you all could have these supports. But I feel like people were going without it for too long. So I think we can think about this in a future sense. So when this year is up, what is going to be done and what is being done to advertise, to market, to once again get the word out to community? Once this year is up, this is what you are going to need to do to maintain the service that you have, so that a year from now, your kids and your grandkids, who are all potentially all still in virtual learning, will suddenly, not have access. So I just wonder if there's any conversations yet, Misty, around what is going to happen after this year is up and how community is going to be supported come that time.
Yeah, I mean, so from a federal policy perspective, Comcast is certainly advocating and encouraging that EBB become a permanent program. So we're very supportive of that program. And then I think too, there's opportunity, Baltimore City is a great example, that there's opportunity for us to set up digital equity funds. Think of, the Maryland Fuel Fund is a great example. It is there to support and help people who might have problems with their electric or heating bills. And so if they get into arrears, it's a fund that people can apply. So I think there are a lot of things that in a long-term strategic fashion that's going to be implemented at the local and state levels for this. Going forward, but we're certainly advocating that EBB, the emergency broadband benefit, become a permanent feature that allows Comcast to participate in a permanent fashion.
Thank you for that. And I want to jump in and first of all say that I'm going to keep asking questions till about 11, and then we're going to turn to any questions from our viewers and audience. I see some lively things happening in chat and one Q&A, so don't hesitate. John Foster will become the question moderator around 11, giving you a heads up. Just to complete maybe the circle on this conversation, in the paper that we put out, which by the way, my colleague, Mac McComas has put into chat too, if you care to read it, we made 6 broad recommendations. And the first one was oversight and advocacy. And we thought the city of Baltimore should create a director and office of broadband access and digital equity. And I'm so thrilled to report that that was announced in the last week. I can't take credit for it, but it was a good idea that many people thought the city should put in place. So I think, part of that role is to navigate between the public sector and the private sector and the nonprofit sector, but also to be a huge advocate for federal policy, just as you're saying, Misty, because we can't have a cliff effect with a year of emergency assistance that then just goes away and people are left without the resources to continue with such an important journey. So I hope that today and in conversations like this, we're on high alert that we need to build the permanent source of support for digital access, and that we are thinking about it on every level of government. One of the recommendations in our paper is to create a digital equity fund. This would be held outside of government and would be a way for philanthropists, for corporations to support digital equity in a flexible way. to get in the cracks when you need assistance for something that doesn't neatly fit into a budget or a grant request at the public sector level. So I do think that's something that we need to pursue in Baltimore. We've seen it done effectively in other cities, and I think that could be helpful. But we still need to have permanent sources of support for digital access, and that needs to happen, at the governmental level. So let me get off my soapbox here.
Hey, Mary, can I ask you a question? Because I think it's fascinating. And, I talked about this just the other day privately, right? So if you had to prioritize the funding versus maybe what I'll shelf as like the implementation, right? Like what's more important to you, right? Like, do we need to collect and get the funds together before we implement, or should we just start implementing and hopefully get the funds along the way, right? So what's your perspective there?
I'm an impatient person, but I don't feel like we can wait on this. I think we need to create so much excitement and energy around this that it can all happen at the same time. I mean, we can't wait another year for a child to learn or someone to get access to telemedicine or, a job. So I think it is really critical. So I would put everything in motion at the same time. And I think we have such a moment here where this has gotten people's attention, and there's so much interest in this, and we're seeing that through federal legislation. We're seeing it at the state level. Let's not lose this opportunity to really make progress on something on every front. So I want to come back to a point that I think you're all making, which is we can build this, but will they come? And the real question for me here is, how do we build trust and confidence in communities that have not had digital access and who have not participated, so that we get to that state where we have a level playing field in terms of digital equity? And there are huge issues here. I know you've already touched on them a bit, Chrissie, in terms of community to community, but maybe John, Misty, what are you seeing at ground level that you think are the obstacles to adoption? Let's set aside maybe the financial issues for now and just think about in the day-to-day life of someone who is not connected, what are the obstacles, what are the challenges, and how do we change that?
Mm-hmm.
Question.
If I may, if you don't mind, John, this is a great question, because what we know, where service is even being provided for free and customers aren't signing up and taking advantage, it is to what Chrissie and John talked about before, is the trust, the literacy of the constituents, of the clients. And so even when it's free, there are still people not connected. And it gets to that value proposition of the cell phone is not enough. They haven't connected the value of having that connectivity in their life for what their digital life really means, right? Education, working, telehealth, even social connectivity. So I think what we've seen on the ground is that's a real barrier in creating that trust, and the concepts that Chrissie has articulated around the digital navigators, the tech hotline, the churches, everybody talking about this in a way that's relatable and making people understand the value and need to be connected and have that digital footprint for their life, knowing the value that it's going to bring to them. It really is at that community trust level, because even if you give it away, there are other barriers that are preventing people from fully embracing a digital life.
Yeah, and it totally, Misty, and I agree. And it's, finances, of course, that's important, that's needed. We know that. I think a piece that is missing often is we're talking human to human caring. We're talking just getting to know each other, getting to know the cultures within communities. And that is, and before trust can be built, there has to be relatability. And without that relatability from higher up, the barriers are never going to be broken down. So I think it also even goes to, and I know there's this big push in businesses right now in corporate America around hiring, DEI folks and REI, racial equity and inclusion, and diversity and inclusion folks. And I think that is important. But I think, and I hope, should I say, that these corporations and businesses know and are aware that we have to get in and build this trust through simple human interaction. It's not through saying, oh, we're going to do this for you, or we want to do this for you, or this is what we're going to do. It's getting in and talking and saying, what do you need? How are you feeling? I mean, we're talking basic, like I said, mental health. We have folks in communities that have gone through so many traumas, generational traumas, that are still very relevant, that need to be addressed, for there to be a sense of hope. So this hope has to be addressed first, because the hope has been lost. There is no trust. There is no hope in corporate, in business, in Verizon, in Comcast. There's no trust and no hope currently. So that has to be rebuilt. And I want to acknowledge the organizations that are doing community run, ISPs, the Rowdy Orbits, Project Waves, that are going into the communities and building what is called mesh networks, and providing internet, providing connectivity for free at no cost to residents. So, we can say that these companies are coming on board and providing these resources, but the money's coming from the federal government, but where is the money and the resources being put out to the community to rebuild the trust? So I think that the partnership and the collective impact model with these community run ISPs that are in the community, they are of the community, and they're utilizing the community. Community members are actually the technicians that are being trained to put up these mesh networks, that are going into houses in the city, in the most disconnected neighborhoods in the city, to say, you know what, you need this, you deserve this, and this is something that you need for your family to thrive, and educating neighbors from neighbor to neighbor as to the needs in the community. And I just want to acknowledge and just hope that these community run ISPs and community run organizations and the larger corporate organizations can come together and work together to bridge that that lack of trust, and to start rebuilding that hope.
If I could just build on that a little bit, one of our recommendations was an idea we borrowed from a number of other cities, which is for Baltimore to consider a free service to community anchors throughout the city. If we provided free internet access using the city's own broadband access to all neighborhoods through schools, rec centers, we already have it for our library system, we would actually physically reach all of the areas of the city that do not have access today and make that available. It is not the same as having internet access coming directly into your home, but it would be physically proximate and perhaps possible to build some wireless access from those anchors. But I think there are a lot of ways to approach this. What we need, in my view, is a comprehensive solution that is not just schools, just businesses, just homes. We need a comprehensive view of how do we do this across a city, across a state, where we can reach everyone. I'll stop and turn to John. You might want to build on this question. You might want to take questions from the chat room, but what would you like to say about this?
Yeah, I think what's most important is, once again, just the experiences that I've had, like in government, right? Like, I think that we cannot wait to have a comprehensive plan, and we need to, like, in terms of like how we build software, we just need to be agile, right? Like, let's go out, let's try something, let's get some results back and let's see if it works, and then we pivot, right? And I think us having to wait for a comprehensive stamp approved strategy, right? Like I just like I want to get away from that kind of mentality, that kind of thought. I also think that what I really like your thought there, Chrissy, around like empathy, right? Like the nonprofits in the city have the relationships with the folks who need the most help, right? What I would encourage is, all right, let's like galvanize around like one or two or maybe a couple of those nonprofits, and saying, okay, here's the strategy, here's the approach, and let's go test in those spaces. So let's not go stand up another nonprofit to do this. There are already enough in the city to do the work, right? So let's stop the planning and let's do more of the doing, right? That's a meta thought, right? But that's just what I see, time and time again in Baltimore.
Yeah, yeah. And John, to your point, I think it's important that you're right. We have these organizations that are doing the work already. And, even around digital literacy, skills training, uh, I'm going to use Byte Back because, I'm here representing Byte Back that, we just came, to Baltimore in 2019 and are providing digital literacy skills training and other training as well in tech. Um, but I think the downside is that funders traditionally have only funded workforce development, and have only been interested in funding, say, a program like Bite Back if the outcomes are shown that there's some type of industry recognized certification and job placements. Don't get me wrong, that is very important, but that is just one piece of it, because we're talking digital literacy skills that may not be necessarily for getting into the workforce. It may be, as Mary, you mentioned, getting on telehealth appointments or getting to register for a vaccination or accessing state benefits, or just, being, talking to family or friends and staying connected. And my hope is that funders and private local funders as well as corporations will realize that those digital literacy skills are, as you mentioned, a human right. It's no longer a luxury. And to put their money into organizations, into training programs that provide digital literacy skills training without requiring an outcome. The outcome is the education. So more from an educational perspective, also continuing funding workforce development, but creating that opportunity where digital literacy is aligned with reading literacy. It's the same as reading literacy. It's the same as math literacy. It is a need for everyday life and to be a functioning member of society. And these, we have to have the funds to do it. We have to be able to operate. But the organizations are there. We are very present, we are very ready, but we have to have the support of especially the local funders, to be able to provide these trainings for adults who may not necessarily be looking to get a new job or to get a job, period, that just need the skills to be a functioning member of society.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to turn this over to John. We've got about, 6 minutes left. And I will pre-warn the panelists. I'm going to ask you each for a lightning round sentence at the end of what message you'd like to leave our audience with. But John, is there a question or two that you'd like to lift from the chat room or Q&A that we could talk about?
Oh, the chat room is so lively. It's so interesting. Maybe an easy question and then maybe a more in-depth question, and we'll see where time takes us. So the lighter question here is, does digital equity promotion integrate with digital safety and digital security? And thoughts about that?
Someone want to lead on that? I think it's a great question, that as part of digital literacy and training, we absolutely have to build security and safety, because we know how much trouble you can get into with digital access if you don't have the proper safeguards. So maybe Misty and Chrissie could say how you think about this.
Oh, just real quickly, we're making sure that we include for all of our tiers of service our security software. And so, our customers, we have that basic line of defense for our customers, protecting their data, security, the thousands and hundreds of thousands of network checks we're doing to make sure we're protecting it. So we are keeping that privacy and security at the forefront of us managing our network for all customers.
Yeah, and I do think that's a great point. For all, and especially in digital literacy skills training, that it's integrated into the training around internet safety and how to navigate the internet safely, because it can become a dangerous world if you aren't familiar with, scams and fraud and phishing. So all of these things are important and must be integrated into these trainings, whether it's Byte Back or any other digital literacy skills training. I do feel like that's important, a very important piece, especially with our aging adults who are a very vulnerable population. Not just they're being told, not to pick up the phone because of scammers, trying to steal identity. So it's the same with going online. So I feel like that is definitely an opportunity that needs to be explored more and talked about more, as to how to build these safety measures and to ensure folks are aware of these threats, because there are threats out there. So yeah, for sure.
Okay. Anything else you want to raise, John, before we go to a close?
Yeah, I want to. I'm just gonna ask the question, and maybe it's the one that we can all walk away with, and we don't necessarily have to answer here, right? But one of the questions here was how do we realistically expect private companies with the mission of maximizing shareholder value to do a better job of creating digital equity than a representative government that is answerable to its citizens, right? So this idea that we don't price people out of libraries, right? Why do we allow systems to exist that prices them out of having home internet service, right? So there's just that meta thought there, right? I think you started off with this, Mary, right? This is a fundamental human right kind of issue, right? And how do we maybe elevate the conversation to that level? I don't know. General thought.
No, that's a great place to take it. But I would also say, if you're talking about the private sector, there's a lot in this for them. If we have a society that is fully employed, digitally connected, taking advantage of every opportunity they could enjoy through digital access, I think everybody wins. And that's why I don't think this can be purely a governmental responsibility. Government needs to lead on this with great policy, but I think we also need to engage the private sector and make them accountable for helping achieve this too. So I'm at my lightning round moment. So parting sentence from Misty, what would you like to leave this group with?
Well, first, thank you. It's been a delight to be able to spend my Thursday morning with each of you. So parting sentence, I think I'll leave it with, we are a private sector company. We have been and will continue to invest and make digital equity at the forefront of how we do business. And yesterday we just announced our digital equity commitment in kind of celebrating and recognizing 10 years of Internet Essentials, which was the flagship digital equity program that we launched as a company, with a $1 billion commitment to digital equity over the next 10 years. And so I know that number sounds massive and kind of overwhelming, but we're going to continue to do that from a connectivity space. But as Chrissie and John have so artfully spoken to, it's also about access. It's about digital literacy. So making sure that we're investing in those communities, investing with our nonprofit partners like Byte Back and others to make sure that we are tackling this. And that is the commitment that we have made for the next 10 years as a company.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, but Chrissie, give me a sentence, John, and I'll close.
Yes. I'd say, we're moving in the right direction. The silos are coming down, and have been knocking down in the last year. So I hope that we continue to break down these silos, that this collective impact model is something that is here to stay, and that we continue to grow and even become more inclusive, and that community becomes truly that community where community members, organizations, businesses, funders all work collectively, for the greater good. So I just am hopeful for the continued future of the city and the country.
John?
Real quick for me, mindset shift, people. Let's stop talking. Let's do more. Time to go. Let's roll.
I'm all in on that one. Thank you. I think I will close by saying that I don't think many people appreciate the resources we have here in Maryland and in Baltimore and how solvable these issues are. And part of the answer are the people that are committed to this. And I think we've heard from three of you today, and certainly myself, in saying that I think this is a problem that we can tackle and we need to tackle. So I'll just thank everyone for joining today, and thank you to the panelists and to the Maryland Technology Council.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.